most beautiful thing that I ever saw was under the microscope. When you see a brain under the microscope, that beautiful color, those fine vessels, that pulsation. You have to decide on the approach of that, where you're going to approach, what fibers are you going to transect, are you approaching it. The peer interaction is, in my mind, more important than the horizontal is more important than vertical. So what I can teach a student is less important than what a student can teach another student.
Hello everyone, my name is Gaurav Dev and I'm the founder and CEO of Scientific Dialogue. Today I'm with someone who studies the most complex part of what makes us human, the human brain. He is none other than Dr. Ather Enam. He heads the surgery department at the Aachen University Hospital, has a teaching experience of more than 30 years and did his PhD in neuroscience from the Northwestern University. So sir, I think your credentials are too much for this video. So let's dive right into the questions. How are you doing?
I'm doing very fine. Thank you for asking, and thank you for being here. I'm very impressed with this group of high school students doing such a wonderful thing, going beyond the curricular activities. And this whole group is very impressive.
Thank you so much, sir. So sir, let's start with something that I think most A-level students would be able to relate. So let's assume that even though I'm an A-level student, let's assume that I'm studying the intermediate board. How do I get involved with the neuroscience research, which is happening in urban centers like Karachi?
So to get involved in neuroscience research at that stage is not really required. What you need to do is to build up your knowledge base. So at some point in your life, it can be whether you're a 6-year-old, you get interested in certain thing, or you get interested in certain thing when you are 18 years old. Whenever you get interested, you start to build up that knowledge base before you can do research. So at high school level, you don't have to go and do research on basic science and clinical science of neuroscience. But the first thing you do is build up the knowledge base. And in a way, that's a knowledge research. So you can, nowadays, you have a wonderful facility known as internet that we did not have when I was a kid your age. So you can search the net, you can pick up the books, good books, read about that knowledge base based on your interest. But most important in that is to actually, first of all, develop a rational and logical thinking.
What do you mean by that?
So what it means that when you talk to people, there are a lot of things, a lot of concepts which are pseudoscience. And for a beginner, you really can't figure out, and not even for beginner, for even I talked to some 60-year-old and they don't understand what's the difference between science and pseudoscience. So it's a matter of training your brain, reading good books, reading good scientists. And once you read and read and read and read, whether it's internet based or whether it's good books that you're buying in through Kindle or actual books, you train your brain to figure out what is science and what is pseudoscience. So, if you go into think that how a neuron works, that's fine. But then if somebody says, actually stones have consciousness also, that's pseudoscience, right? But then a person who doesn't understand science, doesn't have a logical thinking, you can convince that person to believe in that. Right? So it starts, first of all, you train your mind, you educate your mind to think rationally, think logically. And then you say, okay, look, I'm interested in quantum mechanics, quantum physics, right? Yeah. Or I'm interested in neuroscience. So then you read more about those things. And then a time comes when you have done your basic studies, then you want to get involved in research. So for example, you go into bachelor's, or you are doing a medical student, then you can get involved with some research at that point. And so at that point, you don't. So you may, when you read about, let's say, brain, you will have these grandiose ideas about, okay, how does this thing happen? I want to do research on this thing. Don't do that. Just educate yourself. But when it comes to research, do something which is doable, which is understandable, which you can figure out. And for that purpose, you need to find good mentors. So you will find good research mentors in big institutions. But then if you go to a good research mentor without a good knowledge base, or a knowledge base that is full of pseudoscience, that will turn off that mentor.
Just to add on to that, I also believe that it is necessary to ask yourself the right questions, to be curious, to be hungry for knowledge. I think at that point, it is required. So let's say I've built up my knowledge base, and my foundations are pretty strong in that area. And I want to get into research. So what are some of the most promising research areas in neuroscience?
So, promising or interesting areas, you can't predict at this point, because most of the time predictions are wrong. That's the property of our thinking, right? We can't predict things. Nobody could have predicted 40 years ago that the air travel would not advance a whole lot, whereas the computer sciences would advance so much that I would have this cell phone that has more information than all those computers combined together in 50s. So what I would suggest is that what attracts you in there, go after that. So for example, what attracted me was actually the cell and molecular biology of neurons, and memory. How is memory formed? Those things were interesting to me, and that's where I read most of the neuroscience books where I could, and neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, and all that thing. Back in 80s, there was not much of a mentorship available, but then I went into PhD. I went to those mentors who were doing research on synaptic plasticity or memory, and I started to work on that. So, but then somebody else may be interested in neural networks. Somebody else may be interested in problems of consciousness. Somebody else may be interested on development of human brain. So is whatever interests you, that will be promising for you.
I think you mentioned a very important point, and just talking about something that I think you have a good knowledge of, that is how memories are formed. Do you want to share some key ideas of that, how memories are formed, how neural patterns are formed within our brain?
So, we still don't know a whole lot about how memory is formed, right? But then Eric Kandel got a Nobel Prize. He actually studied it not on human brain. He studied it on slug, sea slug, and its name is it's a species, Ecclesia californica, and in there are ganglia where their circuits are formed. So if you stimulate a part of that slug, it will withdraw its other part because of noxious stimulus. So you can pair that noxious stimulus with its normal response, and you can develop different paradigms of habituation and sensitization. So he dissected out that ganglia and looked at that and found that what happens, where is this memory happening? It's a memory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you give me noxious stimulus, I'll withdraw more. Next time that noxious stimulus comes in, or something paired with it, I will withdraw more, although it's not noxious, because the memory is formed, and that memory was in the ganglia. And they found that the ionic principles, they found the receptors, the neurotransmitters, and the expression of proteins that makes those synaptic connections stronger. So that's the molecular basis. At the human level, it's much more complex. That was a very simplest sort of memory, right? At a human level, the memory of what happened when I was in my first day of school. How did I feel? So obviously, what I felt, what I saw at that point, that triggered a response in certain neuron and certain neural circuits. And if I can fire the same neural circuits again, I will have the same feeling and same scenario in front of me, right? So what is memory is that if those circuits can be strengthened, that something else triggers firing in those circuits, you will have same memory of emotions and feeling and of those visual perception and all that thing, right? Yeah. So that's what memory is. Now, hippocampus plays an important role of doing this thing. People are still studying at the molecular aspect, different aspect, that how repeated firing can strengthen synapses and how these circuits work, and that's called long-term potentiation, which is a way of looking at these things. It's been going on for a few decades now. So there are a lot of ways of doing it. But what I can tell you is memory is in different part of the brain, mainly in the association cortex, where all the, like for example, it's a cell phone, right? Yeah. So the cell phone, if you give it to a 1-year-old child, that kid may not know. Or if you give it to a 50-year-old who had never seen a cell phone, never seen a phone, will not know it's a cell phone. Why am I calling it a cell phone? Because I saw it before, I held it in my hand, I know how heavy it is, I know what it does, I could talk through it. So all those experiences were stored in my brain, in my association cortex. The sight, the sound, and it doesn't have a smell, but all the sensory parts, they came together, and that kept on building up. And I have a sort of, you can say, an engram, a whole set of circuits that can be triggered by when I see this. Oh, that's a cell phone, although it's off right now, but I know what it will do because I've experienced it before. So that's how memory is stored. And then there are ways of sort of triggering those memories, and that's where the hippocampus may play a role in it, of storing it in a certain way, and other sensory stimuli, other triggers can then trigger those circuits that brings those memories back.
Talking about memory, can you narrate to us the experience or the reaction that you had when you saw the brain for the first time?
Okay. Yeah. So for memory, actually, it's important. So memories are different kinds of memories, right? So one memory is about which involves declarative memory, right? And one memory is non-declarative memory.
What is that?
So declarative memory is that something that I can tell you about, like you asked me about what I felt about the brain. And one is non-declarative memory. If you ask me that, how do you bike? I can't explain it to you.
Yeah.
Right? So that's non-declarative memory. So in declarative memory, emotion, story, space, place, where it happened, those are important things. If you have an emotion with certain thing, it sticks to your memory more. And the neural circuitry is such that whenever there's an emotional aspect to any experience, it gets embedded, ingrained in your brain better, because those circuits fire more, and that's where hippocampus and areas around hippocampus come into play. So the first time I saw a brain, obviously it was a very experience, but then the most beautiful thing that I ever saw was under the microscope. When you see a brain under the microscope, that beautiful color, those fine vessels, that pulsation. But I have a more vivid memory of the first time I saw blood, which was in medical school, and I just felt very nauseous, right? So emotions coming in, right? So that's the memory.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about research, and we covered a few areas as well. So how do you think that this research could have an impact on someone, let's say from a patient from Ather? How does that research, which is happening in the urban centers or let's say internationally, how does that trickle down to these rural areas?
So that's a very good thought, that research directly helping people who need to be helped, right?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is not simple, because at one extreme is a research that's for the sake of research, that's for the sake of knowledge. And the byproduct of that research eventually helps in helping people, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody is studying the the quasars and pulsars at the distance, how is it going to help somebody in Ather? Not really, right? But then the knowledge base that builds up, eventually the science and technology that builds up, that whole fabric becomes stronger, which then eventually, so directly or indirectly, every research is going to help someone, right? In resource limited areas where you don't have a lot of money to do research, you want to focus on research that has a direct benefit to someone.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of question you're asking about. So yes, there are areas of research where you say public health research. So instead of studying that how a photon can change a certain molecule in my rods and cones that can change the membrane potential, which can then send the message back to my brain, versus, what vaccination should I use for these people who are dying because of the problem in that area. So this is a direct effect that will have an indirect effect. If you don't have a lot of money, you probably want to do this stuff, right? So that's where the public health comes in. And you talked about distance. So that's one of the main thing that I'm interested in. It's called global surgical care, because a lot of people die because of lack of facilities in their area by the time they get to a certain place. And you have Googled it, that distance wise. So we did a brain tumor epidemiological study, and in that, there are a lot of people who are traveling more than 500 kilometers to get their treatment for brain tumors.
I think let me frame a question for that. So is there a way to make surgery more accessible and affordable for the people of Pakistan?
Yes. So it is, and that's where the global surgical care comes in. But then it's very difficult to do it at a private level. It has to be at a government level, because then you need to have small centers all across the country, which can take care of simple problems. They can then escalate with bigger problems to someone not too far, the district level, hospitals, well equipped with good doctors, good nurses, good equipment, not very expensive. It has been calculated. And then if there's something even more complex than that, then that gets shifted to, a tertiary care center. So it has been worked out. It is being worked out. The public health aspect, what we call as global surgery, that is an area that a lot of people are getting interested in, that how we can improve life and save life by doing this at the public health policy level. Unfortunately, the public health policy is in shambles because of all the political issues that are happening in the low middle income countries, or in high income countries also. But then if you focus on those, like in certain Scandinavian countries, the public health aspect the problems go away.
And where do you see Pakistan in this global landscape? And, where do you see the future of Pakistan in this regard?
So, if there are kids like you, I see a future of Pakistan is much brighter. But at this point, it's pathetic, because of people who are taking care of things around us, who can manage the policies. Even a simple thing, it's very difficult to push through. And that is because their level of education, even if they're educated, their level of rational thinking is very low. So, but then, if you can make them think rationally, the next generation coming up should be able to do better things.
All right. And so a lot of people, I think, have this question when, deciding a career, and their parents ask, what is the scope of this, career? So where do you see the scope of the research?
So that's a good question. So I have been saying, and my youngest child is about your age, and my oldest child is 30 plus, right? And I have never asked any of my children to go into this field. What you do is you let them explore. You provide all the opportunities. One of the best things that you can do in your home is have books around you, right? That enhances the level of exploration and all the thing. So if you have enough information in front of that child, the child can choose whatever the child wants to do. If let's say when you get married and you have a child, and the child one day comes to you and says, I want to specialize in garbage collection. You'll say, what? You're gonna be a garbage man? No, don't do that. That person may do wonders in that. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be some very glamorous kind of a thing. I want to be a journalist of international affairs, specializing in interviewing only the presidents. Yes, very nice. But then if I don't have an interest in that, I will not go anywhere, right? So go where the passion is. Go where you are interested. So when a parents are supposed to do this, is that they are supposed to look at the interest of a child and provide opportunities for that child to grow further in that one. but then let the child explore as.
I think you found your passion at a pretty early age, I believe. And after you found your passion, after you found your interest, and when you are doing such things related to neurosurgery, and when you enter the operating room, what is your mindset at that time when you see the brain tumor on the screen? How do you deal with that?
So when you see a brain tumor on the screen, or when we look at the MRI before we go for operation, right? And the thing that you have in your mind is that how can I help that person? How can I remove that tumor without hurting that person? That's the first thing comes in your mind. Early on when you're very new, you are saying, how can I remove this thing? And then you realize it's not that how you can remove this thing. How can you help that person by removing this thing? And how can you avoid hurting that person while you're removing that thing?
Yeah.
That's what comes to your mind. Then we look at, a brain. You can't just like open up a brain and say, oh, let me remove this part. Oh, there's a tumor. Let's remove that. You can't do that. You have to decide on the approach of that. Where you're going to approach, what fibers are you going to transect? Are you approaching it? Are those very crucial fibers? Can you choose some other trajectory getting to there? Once you get to the tumor, are we right at the edge now? Do we have to go beyond the edge? If I go beyond the edge, that person may go paralyzed. So, those are things. And that's where the awake craniotomy comes in.
Yeah, that was my question. What kind of surgical techniques do you use?
So that's where the awake craniotomy comes in, that, if I'm removing a tumor and I'm asking the person to talk and read or move the arms and leg, and I keep on removing, and at some point I say that, if the speech is going down or the movement is going down, I stop there. Because although on the screen with the neuronavigation system, I know that we're reaching next to the eloquent part of the brain. Every part of the brain is eloquent, by the way, but then they're reaching the part of the brain that's going to give him much more deficits. Then I stop. So the approach is being humble. The approach is how to help that person instead of conquering the tumor, not a cowboy. That's how I look at it.
And you developed and built upon these surgical techniques at the Ather University Hospital. So actually I wanted to ask upon that what do you think is the reason why most people who aspire to become doctors one day aspire to be at the Ather University?
I'm not from Ather University. I'm from Dominical College. Ather was not there at that point, and I still think that some of these institutions are excellent institutions. Any institution can be an excellent institution. What Ather has a benefit is that it has a critical amount of people that come in there. So it's the most competitive one, right? So what happens that all those who have those traits of excelling, they come together. And then the doctors who were trained and they come back and they say, I want to teach at Ather. So it creates an environment.
Yeah, an ecosystem.
And yes, you can say that way in a way. And there's a lot of peer interaction. So the peer interaction is, in my mind, more important than the horizontal is more important than vertical. So what I can teach a student is less important than what a student can teach another student. So that interaction that puts you, it's like, a man is known by the company she or he keeps, right? So that company is why, because it's the peer interaction that brings you thinking about. So if I'm talking about, a neuronal circuitry all the time, and you are my colleague, you're my friend, you'll be talking about those things too. But if I am just, talking about some of the nonsense, entertainment is always good, but just like, something that is not of much value, but then keep on doing it again, then that's going to rub off on you also, and you will do the same thing, right? The Eisenhower grid. So Eisenhower grid is that you divide your time efficiently into 4 parts. So on one axis is important, not important, and another axis is urgent, not urgent. So that gives you 4 categories. One is important and urgent. One is not important, not urgent. And one is important and not urgent, or not important and urgent, right? So important and urgent gets taken care of. Like, for example, in neurosurgery, somebody comes with a gunshot wound. Everything is important, it's urgent. And then the thing that it's not important but urgent. Somebody, why don't you do me this, get me that, I need it, but that's not important, right? You waste time in that one also. The lot of time wasted is that which is not important, not urgent, just going over it, and this and that, and TikTok things, that's a snag. It's good entertainment, little TikTok. But then I see that people just start doing nothing but TikTok, right? So that's a waste of time. What is most important is for your career, for your growth, is that square which says not urgent but important. That develops you.
Long-term things, maybe.
Long term, because
Yeah.
what happens, you push that on the back burner. We will do it. Let's say it's about writing a paper. Yes, I've got a lot of other things to do, and I'm going to chat with this guy, I'm going to do that, that's important, do that. But then writing a paper just goes from week to months to years. So you have to discipline yourself that, look, that stuff which is important but not urgent should not be missed. And those people who are successful, they are the ones who are focusing on that part.
I think you mentioned a lot of good things, especially with regard to the horizontal mobility thing that you mentioned, and how peers,
Horizontal interaction.
and how peers can help each other out. And you developed the surgery interest group, and so can you talk about that?
Right. So surgery interest group, yes, it fits into that thing, the horizontal, the peer interaction. So we actually at AKU, we formed a surgery interest group early on, and those were all these energetic, bright students who were interested in their career in surgery. They came together, and they drive us. Their energy drives us. I don't drive them; they drive me. And then they have reached out to a lot of other medical schools and international now also now, and they have ambassadors. So it's a network that's building up. And then several years ago, we formed this neuroscience interest group also. So the neuroscience interest group is for those students who are interested in neurology, neurosurgery, or basic neuroscience. So, and then there's another group like like students organization for or students oncology interest group, something like that. So there are several groups that are forming. The benefit of these groups is that there's a lot of interaction, a lot of chatting. Like this the real tweeting that happens is there.
You revolve around yourself around those.
So it's good. So those groups are good, and I think that should happen at the high school level also, where you should have these groups that reinforce each other's interest, right? And instead of just an amorphous life, you probably have a life where you're focused on an interest. You enjoy everything, but then you focus on certain interests also.
Yeah, I think here Pasman fits into the picture. And can you tell us how we can replicate this model in high school, or do you have any suggestions for that?
Right. So Pakistan is Society of Basic and Applied Neuroscience. I formed that back in 2007, but only in the last 8 years I have made it very active. And a few years ago, a student like you, she talked to me about certain research, and I was blown away by that. I have not been very successful in setting up a student group of PASPAN, but it's in the offing. And if through your channel, if people are interested, let me know, because I'm interested in setting it up. There are students that are coming together, and what I can do for that is the student group for PASPAN. I can go and deliver lectures. You want to talk about brain? Let's do that. You want to sit down in a big circle of 10 kids or 20 kids and just talk about brain? I'm willing to do that. I can go to school, I can set up lectures. So this PASPAN student group is a great idea. And it should work with the neuroscience interest group that is in the medical schools, but then at the high school level, yes, we can do that.
All right. Sir, I believe this was very helpful and very insightful, because this dedication is not something that we see in every neurosurgeon in Pakistan, and it is inspiring as well. And I believe that students from high school to university level can gain something from this episode. Thank you so much for having this.
Thank you for having me. And everybody is dedicated in certain thing. It's just I'm focused on this one. But everybody has dedication, and everybody is doing great work in this world. Well, I wouldn't say everybody, but most of the people, right? But if you can, at the end of your whatever channel you're gonna put it on, if you can provide a link how for them to get back to Paspan. Then we have developed the infrastructure in the Paspan in the society where they can become part of it, contribute, and get help. And then it also goes to Pakistan Society of Neuro-Oncology, which is this society of brain tumors that I formed, and then Pakistan Academy of Neurological Surgery that I have formed. On that platform, I actually want to teach and train a lot of neurosurgical things, simple neurosurgical things.
So just an idea. So how about Scientific Dialogue releases a Google form, which is basically a Pasban interest group, and people sign up for that, and we give you the database of all the high school
That would
students.
be just wonderful.
Yeah, so they can be affiliated to all the institutions that
Absolutely,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Societies, peer interaction.
Yeah. All right. Great, sir. Any last message that you would like to give to all the students watching this?
Well, so last message is enjoy your life, right? I mean, and how do you enjoy your life? You find more enjoyment in actually doing things, setting up goals, struggling for that. There's a lot of enjoyment. I mean, I can pick up a TikTok and watch that. Yes, I enjoyed that. But that enjoyment is different. But if I say, you know what, I want to make a Pakistan neuroscience student group and I want to be part of that, that's a struggle.
Yeah,
How do I
that's-
contact this? How do I do that? But once I get there and I start to do good things, that will give me a long-term
Yeah. Fulfillment.
fulfillment. And that's the message. Enjoying life.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.